Welcome. Today, in this explainer, we're unpacking a truly fascinating era. Over just a single century, the entire legal and social fabric of colonial India was completely rewritten. We're going to decode the major social reform laws enacted during the British Raj. We'll get right into the weeds of this era and see exactly how some deeply rooted social practices were challenged, modified, and in some cases, completely abolished through a series of monumental legislative acts. It's like looking at a massive puzzle of cause and effect, so let's get into it. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap. First up, we've got early reforms tackling sati and slavery. Second, we'll look at widowhood and property rights. Third, combating child marriage. And finally, number 4, the complex legacy of all these reforms. To really grasp modern Indian law, you absolutely have to understand the sheer momentum captured right here between 1829 and 1930. This timeline is the backbone of our explainer today. Every single one of these dates represents a huge shift in human lives. By looking at them together, we're going to trace a fascinating chronological chain of cause and effect and really see the sweeping magnitude of this century-long reform movement. Section 1. Early Reforms. Sati and Slavery. This initial wave of legislation set the precedent for the whole century. The year 1829 marks a massive legal milestone. Governor-General William Bentinck enacted the Bengal Regulation, which officially made the practice of sati illegal. And why Bengal first? Well, it was the epicenter of both intense social friction and British administrative power. But here's the thing. Bentinck didn't just act in a vacuum. This landmark law was driven by the tireless, passionate advocacy of the great Indian reformer Raja Ram Mohan Roy. It was an unprecedented collaboration between the British administration and Indian intellectualism, and it fundamentally altered the legal landscape of colonial India. From Bengal, it quickly spread to Bombay and Madras. And the reformist momentum didn't stop there. By 1830, a dedicated anti-Thuggee task force under William Sleeman was formed by Bentinck. Around the exact same time, the legislative wheels began turning on another massive issue: slavery. The Charter Act of 1833 laid the crucial groundwork. And finally, a decade later, in 1843, under Governor-General Lord Ellenborough, slavery was officially abolished. This wasn't just a paper law, It was a profound structural shift that impacted millions of lives, dismantling a deeply entrenched system of human bondage right across the subcontinent. Section 2, Widows and Property Rights. Let's move to and see how this builds, because fixing one social issue inadvertently highlighted another. Before we get into widowhood, we really need to understand a very specific and honestly highly controversial piece of legislation passed in 1850. It's called the Lex Loci, or the Religious Disability Act. Basically, this act stated that a person would not be deprived of their right to ancestral property if they renounced their religion and adopted another. Historically, this legal mechanism created tremendous tension because it effectively removed a major financial barrier to religious conversion, which in turn encouraged Christian conversion in India. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the heartbreaking dilemma that soon emerged from the earlier reforms. On one hand, a major victory had been won. Sati was illegal and women were no longer dying on funeral pyres. But the surviving widows were left in a terribly vulnerable state. They were socially destitute, had no rights, no permission to live a full life, and absolutely zero legal recognition if they wished to remarry. So they were physically saved from the pyre, but entirely abandoned by society. And this brings us to a beautiful example of passing the baton in history. Ram Mohan Roy had sparked the initial vision, which led directly to the ban on sati. But to solve this huge subsequent crisis of destitute widows, reformer Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar took the baton. He realized that widow remarriage was the logical consequence of the sati ban. You literally can't have one without the other. His relentless advocacy ultimately culminated in the passing of the historic Hindu Widow Remarriage Act of 1856, providing a completely crucial legal lifeline to thousands of women. Section 3. Combating Child Marriage. We're moving into the late 19th and early 20th centuries now, focusing on the intense legislative fight to protect childhood. 12. That number represents a truly shocking historical reality. As we transition into the late 19th century, the legislative focus shifted hard toward protecting childhood. In 1891, the reformer Behramji Malabari fiercely championed the Age of Consent Act. This law was designed to discourage child marriage by legally raising the minimum age of consent for girls. And what did it raise the age to? From 10 years old up to 12. It's absolutely staggering to look back at these numbers today, but for sure, it was a crucial, hard-fought legislative step forward at the time. And this brilliantly illustrates the complex domestic pushback these laws faced. You see, not everyone supported these British enacted laws, even when they targeted undeniable social evils. Prominent nationalist leader Bal Gangadhar Tilak strongly opposed the 1891 Age of Consent Act. His argument wasn't necessarily in favor of child marriage, but rather a firm anti-colonial stance. He believed that Indians should reform their own society from within, and that the British had absolutely no right to interfere in Indian domestic and cultural matters. 14. Fast forward to 1930, and the legislative landscape shifted yet again. Through the dedicated long-term efforts of Harbala Sarda, the government passed the Child Marriage Restraint Act, which is widely known as the Sharda Act. This landmark legislation officially made the marriage of girls under the age of 14 illegal across the board, pushing the boundary of child protection even further into the 20th century. Section 4. The Legacy of Reform. Now we're going to weigh the historical impact of these centuries-spanning actions. So the crucial point is this: the British administration, often spurred by brilliant Indian reformers, incrementally created laws to remove deeply rooted social evils like sati, slavery, and child marriage. Historically, these are widely recognized as some of the most progressive works undertaken by the British in India. But beyond their immediate context, why does this matter to us today? Because these very laws laid the foundational DNA for modern human rights legislation in post-independence India. Yet because they were enacted by a foreign power, they also ignited deep, lasting debates about the friction between essential social necessity and unwarranted colonial overreach. Which leaves us with a provocative final question to ponder. When we look at this century of legislation, were these laws purely progressive social leaps that modernized a nation, or should they also be viewed as tools of colonial interference that overstepped their boundaries? It's a complex, dual-natured legacy that historians still debate today. What do you think? Keep questioning the history that shapes our present, and we'll see you next time.